Welcome to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part of this recording. Welcome to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part. Indigo Shire Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land, which now comprises the municipality of Indigo Shire. We pay respect to their elders past and present, celebrate and respect their continuing culture, and acknowledge the memories of their ancestors. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire, and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council powers and functions to the best of our skills and judgment. I'd just like to let you all know that Councillor Croucher is with us on Zoom and will be participating in this council meeting. All of the other councillors are present. Do we have any apologies and leaves of absence? Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? There is no one in the gallery, so there will be no open forum. However, there is business of... We'll go from open forum to community and council achievements. Mr. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Yeah, I'd like to do a community and council achievement, and it is a council achievement. It's an internal one, involved external people. So it was the Ida Hobbit morning tea and flag raising ceremony, which was conducted this morning, the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Interphobia and Transphobia. And whilst it may be difficult to see, there are rainbow flags decorating a small portion of our desks. So I'd like to acknowledge the great work that was done. There was Amelia from the Beechworth Secondary College, and there are other students from the college that attended. Amelia spoke about her own personal perspective, and it was quite moving to hear that, and it set a great tone. Mika Bosland sang, and once again it was a self-composed song, and had a lot of meaning, and she did a terrific job. There was a Rutherglen Renegade, so students from the Rutherglen High School, and Alison from the Wangaratta LGBTQIA+ in the northeast. So it was a well-attended event. It was well done. There was plenty of staff there, and it was representatives from the mayor, councillors, and the CEO and down. So I think it's well worth celebrating and acknowledging, one, the day, and two, council's part in promoting that.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsworthy. There is somebody wishing to come in as part of the gallery. We're up to item 7, which is condolences. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Yes, I have two condolences today. One for Desmond Zwar and the second for Bill Dobson. In order to give some meaning behind the one for Desmond Zwar, I would like to read out an abridged version of what his son Adam wrote on the day that his father passed. And so it was on the 27th of April. Today I lost my dad, the author, journalist and 16 handicapper golf, Desmond Zwar. He was 90. He wrote 20 non-fiction books. They were bestsellers like The Loneliest Man in the World about Rudolf Hess, In Search of Sir Keith Murdoch and the runaway hit Golf. The Dictionary with illustrations by Jeff Hook. He also wrote a book about this year on his golf tour with 5-time British Open champion Peter Thompson. He lamented that he started the tour playing off 14, but once Arnold Palmer, Gary Player and Lee Trevino all tried to help him with his swing, he suddenly played off 21. He was pretty old school, Dad, and manners were big on his list, so kindness and generosity. So he was well into his most recent battle when he allowed the staff at the wonderful Acacia High Care facility in Beechworth to tell me he wasn't doing so good. When I got there yesterday, he rallied, and while sipping a glass of red wine, told me he believed was bought there under false pretenses. But this morning, he'd reverted to his bed, struggling with respiratory ailments that plagued him. I went out to get some lunch, and when I returned, I was happy to see his breathing had settled, and then I realised he wasn't breathing at all. Golf might have been Dad's love, but he was actually great at cycling, competing against the Opperman brothers on the country road races for money. He was a natural leg spinner, and those who have read my book would know he once shot the head off a taipan from 20 metres as it lunged at our beloved cat. I didn't inherit Dad's eye with the rifle. When he came to teach me and my fellow scouts to shoot, I not only missed the target but broke the louvs of a nearby building. The incident must have brought Dad great shame that he didn't show it. Thank you to the staff at the Acacias at Beechworth for looking after him. Thank you, Meryl and Julio. Thank you to the Deacon Sue at the Christchurch in Beechworth for giving Dad the sacrament yesterday. It meant the world to him. And thank you to Amanda for being such a support to both of us. Well, that's that. I know nothing about the afterlife, but I'd like to think that he's now with Mum. That'd be great. Here's to a sparkling 90, Dad. So many beautiful shots, a couple of risky ones as well. But I'd rather that than a Dowler century. I thought it was really well written and worth repeating. So the family themselves as well are quite well known in Beechworth, and I was asked to make that. So I'd like to move in relation to that one that under seal a letter might be sent to his family marking the condolence.
Would somebody like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Horn. Is anybody against? Carried.
The second one is a little bit more personal because I knew Bill Dobson. I knew him well. Born on the 14th of August 1942, and he died on Anzac Day this year at 79 years old. Bill grew up in El Dorado and had a varied working life until he started work for the Indigo Shire of Beechworth in 1969. He worked his way up to foreman for Capital Works and later ran the filter beds for the water filtration system for Beechworth, retiring in 1997. Retiring after 28 years at the age of 55, he was fortunate enough to go travelling around Australia with his wife for a number of years before ill health. Bill was a founding member of the Men's Shed in Beechworth. He was instrumental in getting it off the ground as part of the executive before passing on the baton, a legacy that will support the Beechworth community for years to come. Bill was a font of all knowledge when it came to council operations, where things were and why things were done back in the day. He was funny, he was a passionate man, he was above all a great family man. He's survived by the love of his life, Betty, his son, Ron, his daughter, Sharon, and their families. Vale to Bill Dobson, and also move that a letter of condolence be sent to his family.
I'd like to mention that I also knew Bill very well, and he was a great guy, a real family man, and a credit. Do you wish to move a motion?
Yeah, so I'd like to move that motion that a letter under seal be sent to his family condolence.
And seconded by Councillor Price. Is anybody against? Carried.
Thank you.
Item 8, the recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on 26 April 2022 as published on the council's website be confirmed. Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Is anybody against? Carried. Business arising. At the last council meeting, we had technical difficulties, and the open forum questions were asked and responded to, but it wasn't recorded. So the questions on notice from that meeting, I'll read them out, and I think the CEO is going to respond. The first question was from Robin McLeish, which was, council will spend in excess of 15 million to complete the current cycleways. The service plan area statement reports an expenditure of 71,000 for cleaning and maintenance of pathways year to date. Will council modify the service plan area statement to provide specific information for footpaths and for cycleways, as is the case for the Capital Works Monitor. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just for the purpose of the exercise, I'll just read out the statement exactly as it was read out last time, but wasn't heard properly. So I'll read it exactly as it was. So the response was provided by Director Ian Allett, Director of Infrastructure Services. He said that year-to-date expenditure on pathways, as reported in the service plan area statement, is actually 110,000. I don't have the breakdown in front of me, but between footpath maintenance and rail trails, a little more than half has been spent on footpaths. Council does not intend to report differently. The budget is reported based on the way that it's structured within the financial management system around service areas. To break it down to another level could expand the current 40 odd service plan areas to perhaps beyond 150 areas. We report on the variances in expenditure at the service plan area level, but I would be happy, Mrs. Ian Allett, talking to Robin McLeish, I would be happy to answer any specific queries on individual budget areas that you may have.
The next questions were from Iris Manick on behalf of the Lions Club of Beechworth. It has come to the attention of the Beechworth Lions that Indigo Shire Council is looking at Bluff area and Lions Memorial Walk as the preferred start of the Beechworth section of the Indigo Epic Mountain Trail. This path was approved by Indigo Shire in 2 Lake Sambell development plans. Indigo Shire also assisted Lions in this project. Is it correct? Is Indigo Shire thinking of turning this section of the Lake Walk into part of the mountain bike trail? Beechworth Lions have spent many hours on projects at Lake Sambell recent development since 1990, and our members are concerned and unhappy to think our Lions Memorial Walk honoured past and present Lions and their input in the whole Lake Sambell area has so low regard.
So, Mr. Mayor, I believe that all 3 questions were asked first, and then the Director answered the 3 in one statement.
Sure. The second question is, has it been taken into account all the walkers, visitors, caravan park clients that use this walk to go to and from Sandy Beach and to walk to the southern side of the lake, which Shire is spending a lot of money restoring? Question 3, when were Beechworth Lions going to be consulted of this being one of the possible inclusions to the mountain bike trail?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as read out by Director of Infrastructure Services in last time, it would be premature to suggest that anything has been decided, but there are a few locations that are starting to be considered, but not in any formal way at this point. The Bluff area is one such area. In considering suitable places for a possible trailhead, it would be ideal to identify somewhere with car parking and other facilities such as toilets. The points you've made in your second question are good points and are things that our staff are well aware of. There will be a consultation process and we will engage with the community as we get to that point. We haven't put our minds to what that process will look like at this point. When we do consult about where to best site the trailhead, we will need to take into account a range of things, and the points you raised will be among those. Any formal consideration on this issue is still some time away.
The next question comes from Mark Altringham. How can Indigo Shire Council justify holding part of the regular council meetings closed to the public in breach of their own governance rules, which state all council meetings and delegated committee meetings will be open to the public? To misrepresent a briefing session that is held prior to each council meeting, is attended by all councillors, and in which much of the agenda of the formal meeting is discussed as not being a council meeting, or an intrinsic part of the formal council meeting is in breach of council's obligation to ratepayers and residents of the Shire.
So, Mr. Mayor, this answer was read out by myself at the last meeting, and it related to item 14.1 in the agenda of that council meeting of the 26th of April. Mr. Altringham is correct in that council meetings are to be held open to the public, subject to confidentiality provisions in the Local Government Act. However, the meetings being discussed in the notice of motion are not council meetings, which have a very specific definition under the Act, where a council meeting is a meeting of the council at which all the councillors are entitled to attend and vote, and a decision to do or act in a manner or thing that is made by resolution of the council. Council briefings are not council meetings where councillors do not vote or make decisions at the briefings. They are what are defined in the governance rules as informal meetings of councillors, as described in Governance Rule 72, which states, subsection C, meetings to which this Rule 72 apply will not be open to the public. These are meetings where councillors can't make decisions, but where they are provided information by council officers as background, and where they have an opportunity to ask for further information to be supplied. They also provide a more general forum for issues to be raised, which might then feed into future public meetings. Councillors and officers communicate all the time, and it's necessary that they do so. These briefings are an opportunity for councillors to gather as a group where, with the relevant officers, and gather information they need to be able to make informed decisions. It's always been the convention of Indigo Shire Council to encourage debate to continue to be held in open public meetings where the councillors are able to exercise their power to make decisions.
Item 9, petitions. None received. Item 10.1. The recommendation is the council accepts the year-to-date April financial report, noting the progress against council's Q2 forecast. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Shepherd.
It just didn't go to that part of the agenda, but basically, it looks as though we are going to meet our Q2 forecast. So, considering the variances that we have, but I did want to ask the manager about one of the variances of the $35,000 that we are paying for in the infrastructure department. Sorry, I wish I could find it. And I was just wondering if he could speak to that $35,000 that we have to pay when there is a disaster funding. There's always the $35,000 that we have to pay for it. So I'm just checking that one of those variances is absolutely a cost to us that we won't get back anywhere else. And I imagine that's from the Rutherglen floods.
Director, Indigo Infrastructure Services.
Hi, look, thanks for the question. Yeah, the $35,000 does represent an out-of-pocket expense by council as a result of storm events. So we had storm and flood events through the latter few days of January, and you know, the impact on Rutherglen was the most significant of that. So we've certainly had to incur some costs, and we'll continue to do so. Most of what we spend is claimable back through the government, but there is a formula that we are exposed to the first $10,000 and 25% of the next 100,000. So for any clean-up costs that exceed $125,000, we're exposed to $35,000, and then we're able to claim every cent back beyond that. So that is an out-of-pocket cost that council need to cop, and yeah, beyond that, we should expect to get everything back.
Sorry, thank you for that. Can I just check? So will that be that same costing every time there's the disaster? So every time we spend that amount of money, we take the first $10,000 and then the percentage?
Yeah, look, that's within the guidelines of the Natural Disaster Funding Relief program. So, yeah, the short answer is yes. There's some more complexities to it around what costs we incur from our own staff versus contracted and extra costs. But yeah, that's per event. So whenever there is an event, and certainly at the end of January, we've got I'd describe it as a series of storms that hit over a number of days. Now, they were claimed as a single event, not individual ones that hit Tangam, Balanga one day and Rutherglen a couple of days later.
Thank you.
Councillor Price?
Just to go further on what Councillor Shepherd said, there's some of the variances, they're all detailed in the report. Some of them are due to grants that we've received early. I appreciate all the explanations. They're quite clear, making the report very easy to understand. And it's also good to see that it's noted that as we move into the final 2 months of the year, that council expects that the end of year result will also be consistent with the forecast expectations as it is for this quarter. So thank you.
Would somebody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.2, the recommendation is that council endorses the updated council plan 2021 to 2025 with the following amendment and places it on public exhibition for 21 days and invites submissions. The new action, which is 2.1.9, to commence stage 1 master plan for council owned land in Chiltern, Anderson Road precinct. Somebody like to move the motion to that recommendation? Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price.
This is a typical process that we need to go through to make sure that we're checking that our council plan is still reflective of the community wants and needs. And I think it couldn't be better reflected for the town of Chiltern than to see that new action item that you've just read, Mr. Mayor, because it's certainly been something that's been conversational for a long period of time, and the community is certainly very pleased that council was able to take swift action to obtain that land and to immediately include a stage 1 master plan for that land is just reflecting the urgency of that priority and the fact that it did need to go straight into the council plan.
Councillor Shepherd. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I would just like to say that it's great to see that council is moving so swiftly on this, and there will be a great deal of community consultation as well. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.3 is the 2022-2023 draft budget. I don't intend reading the entire recommendation but parts of it is that council endorses attached documents for public exhibition, the 2022-2023 draft budget for the purposes of Section 94 of the Local Government Act, and the 22-23 draft 10-year financial plan, the 2022-23 draft revenue and rating plan, and the 2022-2023 draft operating income and expense by service. I'd also like to mention that council places the endorsed documents on public exhibition for a period of 21 days from the 18th of May 2021 to the 7th of June 2022, and invites any person wishing to make a submission on the exhibited documents to do so prior to 5 p.m. on the 7th of June 2022. Somebody like to move the draft budget? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Tysell. Councillor Goldsworthy.
So a lot of work has gone into developing this budget. It starts at the end of the calendar year and it keeps moving forward. We've had several days where we've discussed the items in this budget. It's been a lot of work for the staff, and they've drawn it together to come up with a capital works program that is $16.7 million. There's a cash deficit of $8.7 million, mainly attributed to the large capital works program, the carryover. $1 million of new borrowings is proposed in the budget. Council still maintains its low to medium risk as assessed by the Victorian Auditor General standardised measures. There's no rate cap variation, and rates will increase in line with the Minister's rate cap of 1.75%. Some of the initiatives out of it are the Council Community Hub with a bit over $3 million, the Tree Canopy Strategy, $30,000, the Recreation Plan Implementation, $120, Rutherglen Silo Precinct, $125, Footpath Construction, $250,000, and the Stage 1 of Master Planning for Chiltern Land, as previously discussed, $50,000. So there's a lot to like in this budget. I'm hoping that the community will respond well with it. We received numerous submissions in relation to it and were provided with some very good guidance. So with that, I commend it to the council to support.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, I'd also like to support the budget. I think that it's it's addressed many of the community concerns that went out in the budget submission, and we've actually adjusted where we put our funds accordingly. It has a very diverse outlook. It actually provides a considerable amount of money to many of our towns and communities, and it also sees the end of some of our larger cycling initiatives that have been carried forward for quite a few years. So, yeah, I look forward to actually seeing a lot of these projects finished by the end of this year.
Would somebody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
I think we need to get better at balancing the desires of small groups of people who want to participate in free recreational activities whenever they wish, against the everyday needs of our ratepayers who seek, as a minimum, a safe environment in which to live, affordable housing, and a secure job. As a small municipality, I believe we should have the flexibility to respond to the extenuating and ongoing circumstances we face. And yet here we are perpetuating plans that see us delivering a budget that assigns only $482,000 to footpaths across the whole Shire, and yet $1.86 million to cycle tracks. I'm sorry, but I'm adding a serving of squashed avocado to my labelling of last year's budget as a lycra and latte budget.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
I just had a question around the community input into this budget, and I was wondering whether we could have from the manager of finance to talk, Greg Pinkerton, sorry, to talk about how we've managed the budget in view of that community consultation.
I was going to ask the question, and I'll just add to that question, if it's okay with you, Councillor Shepherd, that the council received 311 written submissions, and I'd like to ask the Director of Planning and Corporate Services how council reacted to those submissions. Is that the question you were asking?
Yes, that's what I'm asking. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question, councillors. It's been quite a different process this year with the inclusion of the survey, and we received, as you said, 311 survey responses, which was quite good response. For anybody who's interested, there'll be a short summary of those responses on the website tomorrow with the budget documents, subject to them being endorsed tonight. So all of that feedback from the survey was given to each of the budget managers. So council has 42 services, and each one of those services was required to take that feedback into account with the building of their budget. Fortunately, a lot of the feedback was quite aligned to the council plan, which we built last year and then have updated tonight. So a lot of the actions were already underway. The survey, I suppose, helped focus our attention when we were doing the budget, focused our attention on the priorities for the community. And particularly, we saw some real themes in livability. So that's community wellbeing, recreation, young people, that sort of area. And the other theme we got was a real focus on that core infrastructure, so drainage, footpaths, parks. So as a response, you'll see in the budget documents that there's been a fairly significant increase in recreation, which has gone up 9%. Ageing well has gone up 19%, early years 15%. And it needs to be remembered that in an environment where council's rate is capped at 1.75%, some of these large increases are fairly difficult to be able to fit in while still achieving our long-term sustainability goals. So there's been a fair bit of work to put that in. In addition to those service improvements. There's quite a bit in there for infrastructure. So drainage, there's $500,000 for drainage, $250 for footpaths, which was mentioned before. Parks and Gardens has just tipped over $1 million for Parks and Gardens next year. And of course that Chiltern Master Plan. So that'll be quite exciting to work with the community on what that land, what the future of that land is. So they're just a few examples. There's quite a lot in there. All I can suggest is that people go to the website tomorrow. The summary of the community feedback will be there along with all of the budget documents.
Yes, Councillor Shepherd.
I just wanted to speak to the budget if I could.
Sure.
Yep. I just wanted to speak to the 10-year financial plan and some of the strategic challenges that are in there are for our ageing regional community, which I think is obvious, the ability for businesses and community to pay rates in this economic environment, impacts of the pandemic, and I think what I noted was missing, though, as per the $35,000 that I pointed out in the financial report, was the effect of climate in the next 10 years on our budget and on our finances. So already we're paying $35,000 out of our finances for 1 year for the floods that happened in Rutherglen. And I think we're all aware that our drainage systems, and as per the bridge that was knocked down between Wangaratta and Beechworth on the Wang Beechworth Road, the cost of building them we can't have business as usual anymore when we're rebuilding, when we're looking at drainage, when we're planning for the future. So in the next 10 years, I suppose it's a question to whomever wishes to take it, okay, to the CEO, how are we going to look at that extra costing? Where are we going to get the money from? Because I don't think we can ignore the fact that there is extra costing and it's not factored into this 10-year plan that I can see.
CEO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question, Councillor. I absolutely agree with you. I think that we've got some more work to do in our forecasting. Certainly, we've got a 10-year financial plan, a 10-year, as well as a 10-year asset plan. It does take into account a range of, I guess, a range of known factors and a range of things we try to predict over a period of time, the condition of assets and things like that. I guess we're always conscious of the impacts of climate change and what it might have on us, but we do need to do more work on how that might manifest itself. A bit tricky at the moment. I guess we're, the last 2 years have shown us, fires like we've never seen before, and a series of storms that we've not seen before, not just here but throughout Australia. I think we really need to recognise a lot more that there's a lot more climate variability, and it will impact on our assets and impact on our financials in the future. A bit tricky right now to know how to do that, but I think we've got some work ahead of us in future budgets to try harder to recognise that, try to, even if we can't forecast what it might look like, at least have some sort of provisions for that going forward. So I absolutely agree with you. We need to do more in that space, and the last 1 or 2 years have shown us that anything could happen, anything could be thrown at us.
Thank you. So what will happen? What will happen? I also see it as it's sort of part of our risk management, really.
Yeah, I think there's a need to, for the first part, we need to do more just to recognise it and at least list it more as a risk and variability, kind of variability might have on our financials and on our asset planning and things like that. But we haven't done a lot of work to try and quantify in dollar terms what that might look like. So I think over the next 1, 2, 3 years, we need to put more effort into, even if we can't, because we can't really quantify exactly what it might look like, but we can certainly do a bit more to even just put dollar provisions in there of some description. It hasn't been done in this set of financials, but I think we need to do more work on that future.
So can we strengthen this particular document with at least a line saying that there's a risk and that we are looking into it, or so, I mean, I haven't got the words, but I just, it doesn't have it really at all.
I certainly think there's an opportunity to, between now and the June budget, to amend the documentation, to have some commentary around that. And we can certainly do that, raise the profile of it as a risk. But probably for future years, we need to do more work to try to quantify it. Probably a bit late for this budget, but I think we'll at least get the words in there and let's get it front and centre as an issue to be considered in future years.
So you're not asking that the draft budget be amended? No. So council.
Not for this particular motion, no. I'm just saying between now and the time it's passed, is there an opportunity for us to talk about strengthening with at least a line around the risk management, the financial risk to us with the changing climate?
So you're foreshadowing a motion for the budget, but not this draft budget? No. Do you have any other questions? No. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price.
Just to say that I think that the community expects of us that we can really demonstrate what the process has been that we've been through and that the organisation has been through. And Councillor Goldsworthy outlined some of that already. I think it's become a process that we can be really proud of and something that is added to year after year after the feedback that we get from the previous budget build. It can't be understated the amount of work that went into the community engagement already and the way in which that report was presented to councillors on our first day. I think receiving that feedback and making sure that it goes through to the appropriate places within the organisation doesn't always seem as straightforward as it can be, but I think that report really demonstrated to councillors that that's exactly what happened. And now to see that feedback into the document, we can see just exactly how that process works, and I thank the organisation for that. There's some really exciting projects that are coming up in this particular budget, and I also wanted to say that I think that we've got a number of our strategies and plans underneath this document that we're really confident in, and that just helps to build the budget, that we know we've got those strategies in place. Thank you to the community so far for engaging with it, and please continue to. And I think that the vast majority of councillors have also done that, have come to the budget process to fully engage with it. And I think that's really important because it's our budget, it's the community's budget, it's the organisation's budget. And we get to feedback, we get to input directly into it. So I'm really pleased to be here tonight to say that it looks how I think it should, and that I'll be really happy to pass it and put it back out to the community for feedback today.
I think everybody's spoken. I've got a question for the Director of Planning and Corporate Services. On page 35 of the budget, it's got a heading of footpaths and cycleways and footpath renewal. Over on page 36, at the bottom of that section, it says income local roads and community infrastructure program round 3, Cornish Town Road component, $50,600 shown separately, project cost 0, and under total council cash 22-23 plus carried forward from 21-22, $1.608 million. I'm just wondering why that is in the section for footpath upgrades, and that amount of money. Could you explain why it's there?
Yeah, certainly. The local roads and community infrastructure grants has been going for 3 rounds. This is the last of the 2.1 million that we received for round 3. The reason why it's in this section is that income needs to be recognised in the budget. So that line needs to be in the budget or in the capital works program somewhere. In a lot of respects, it doesn't matter which path it's in. It's traditionally been in the footpath section because particularly the first two rounds of that grant program had quite a large number of footpath projects. So it's in there mainly because the majority of the projects in that grant program were footpath projects. But to be clear though, that 1.6 is split across a number of different projects throughout this budget.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsworthy, do you wish to sum up?
It's a $37 million budget. It's going to cater for the needs of our community and the council infrastructure to achieve that. We've all spoken on it. It's involved some great community consultation. It's out as a draft, and we'd like to hear back from the community as to how they think it's going at the moment.
All those in favour, raise your arm. Against? All right, we'll do it again. All those in favour, raise your hand. Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Goldsworthy, Councillor Gaffney, Councillor Tysell, Councillor Price. Against? Councillor Horn. Item 10.4, local laws 2 and 4. The recommendation is the council endorses the attached draft local law 2 amenity and draft local law 4 control of livestock for the purposes of public exhibition, which will go out for 21 days. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy.
So local law 2 and 4 are a bit of a hangover from the last council, where in 2020 we needed to adopt a version that had been in existence for a fair while because we'd run out of time to do the necessary consultation. That consultation has now been undertaken, where we've received 55 responses from the community over about a month period. And we had quite a few bits of feedback in different themes for the feedback. Some was around chickens, some was around fire pits, and some was around cats being out at night and motorbikes. There is a summary of that feedback on page 36 of the agenda. I think we'll get more feedback by putting this out. Some people will probably be disappointed. There are some obscure parts to this, these local laws, but they're needed basically to protect the amenity of our shire. So it is important. And thank you for the feedback for those that provided it, and happy to receive further. One note that I would make, what we've been told is that once the community has had further feedback, I still believe that it needs to go for a legal review to make sure we've got the wording correct. I don't know whether, is that correct, CEO?
Actually, I don't know the answer to that just offhand.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I think just to make sure the wording is well and truly tightened up. But apart from that, yeah, it'll be very much saying the same thing.
Councillor Shepherd.
I think it's important to note also we changed it from environmental local law to environment local law to amenity, which I think makes more sense and covers all those things that people get annoyed about in towns, really. And great to see from the feedback from the community that a fire pit was added, which is a sensible addition. Everybody probably has a fire pit already out in their backyard, and they just have to be able to use it and not be burning things off, and it has to be for cooking and for enjoying sitting around. So that was a nice thing to add. One of the things that concerned me was that it's a bit of, these local laws are a little bit of like a slap. And I just wanted to check that the first thing we do is a warning, and these are really only used as a last resort when there's nothing else that can be gained from speaking to people and encouraging them not to do something. So I was pretty happy to hear that that's the case. But yes, I agree. It'll be interesting to see if anyone else has any feedback now that they've been changed with that community input.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
Just to say that because some of these local laws are a little bit obscure and most people wouldn't know them, hopefully we will undertake a communications process where we get to put out maybe one law a week and explain it to the public once they're passed.
So Councillor, answer before is yes, but yes, we'll have a legal review at the end of it.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.1, the recommendation is that council notes the April Capital Works report and year-to-date progress in the delivery of the Capital Works program. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? A question from Councillor Goldsworthy first.
Yeah, just a question for the Director of Infrastructure in relation to the proposed or the work that's going on around at Lake Samble and the proposed boardwalk. I'm just wondering how much of that area will be covered by boardwalk and what's the intention with some of those steeper areas, given the limited budget.
Look, thank you for the question, Councillor Goldsworthy. The extent of works around what I'd call the clay bank side of Lake Samble, there's some existing boardwalk structures in place. And I've sort of got some advice this afternoon just to clarify the extent of works that we're currently undertaking. So I'm told there's around 140 lineal metres of new boardwalk or structures that will join up with the existing. And so the entire section where we've sort of got the clay surface underneath that has in the past, washed clay and stuff onto the trail and made it really muddy and slippery in the winter months. That entire section will be a boardwalk. And so in terms of addressing drainage issues, be really confident that in those areas that have been subject to, water washing over the path, that we're able to accommodate all of those with boardwalks that will lift the path above ground level.
Thank you for that. I'd just point out that the lake's about 800 metres long, so 140 metres will cover a small section of it. I only hope we do it well. And
thank you. I acknowledge that, and I suppose it's a matter of getting out on site. There's certainly parts of the trail which are, I suppose, more in need of that, protection from the ground, and that's why, I suppose I'm just keen to make sure we link the existing boardwalk sections with, like I said, 140 metres of new where it's needed, and the remainder of that 800 metre length is in areas that aren't susceptible to the same sort of stormwater issues. So, yeah, hopefully that clears it. Thank you.
I'd say the existing boardwalk coded for about 20 metres, but anyway, I'm happy to move the Capital Works report.
Would somebody like to second that report? Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy.
As we draw nearer to the end of the financial year, it is good that we're getting through quite a few of our capital works. That's probably what the community has an eye on more than almost anything else with what council does. It's something very tangible. So when they see us renewing something or building something, it's almost what they can use out of it. And so we've got some terrific projects that are coming towards the end of their build life, as mentioned by Councillor Teasel, some of those in particular around the rail trail, and I really look forward to their completion.
Councillor Shepherd.
I also just wanted to raise, as per the report, that the Beechworth tennis courts at Barmutha Park are finished, and that there's been a lot of work around our recreational and open space projects. And more importantly, which I think the Rutherglen people would probably be interested in hearing about, is the significant drainage remediation works that are being completed in Rutherglen, including the complete clean out and reshaping of the main drain from Fortuna Street, temporary reinstatement of the Lake King overflow pipes, complete clean out and reshaping the Scott Street outfall drain works, significant amount of pipe clearing in several key locations, construction of abundant swale at the rear of Warren's Lane, and general cleanup of streets, curbs and gutters across the flood impacted town, and upcoming drainage works across the Shires designed for the Lake King Main Street drainage outfall, and design for Fletcher Street drainage strategy at Malish Beechworth, Priory Lanes Works Beechworth, Distillery Road, Glasgow Street, Connor Street and Eyre Street. So drainage is a really high project output at the moment, and we know why.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? No, summing up. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.2, the recommendation is the council endorses the draft asset plan 2022 and places it on public exhibition for 21 days and invites submissions. And that council adopts the asset management policy version 4.1 and notes that it supersedes the previous version from May 2017. Somebody like to move by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Goldsworthy.
My reading of this is that it's more a legislative requirement than adding much to our public asset management. We've already got some very good asset management plans, albeit some of them are a little bit old. But this complies with legislation, and it's got a bit of a tight timeline, so needs to be endorsed today for a draft and get it back for full consent shortly.
Councillor Price.
I'm much more excited about it than that. It's, as Councillor Goldsworthy said, it is a part of a new legislative requirement from the new Local Government Act. But I think that for our community to understand that it's a part of really sophisticated strategic planning. And if you go to page 3 of the asset plan itself, there is a quite a good document, quite a good diagram to show exactly where it sits, that the asset plan sits with our community vision, council plan, budget, finance plan. And beneath that is the asset policy, the asset strategy, and our asset management plans for roads, bridges, stormwater, pathways, and buildings. And again, as we talk about budget builds, long-term financial planning, I think it's really important that we can sit here and say that we have really clear line of sight about how that planning is done. And I think it's a really common sense approach that it's listed within the report that we're working with other North East regional councils and their asset management teams so that there's a consistent approach to our asset plans. And we're working with the technical guidelines that the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions gave to us. So difficult to understand, but I think it's important to understand where it fits in terms of our council planning.
Councillor Shepherd.
I'm sorry to be going on so, but this long-term planning, I need to raise it again, the fact that in this particular document, the asset plan, it says that the climate emergency means that all asset decisions must be looked at through a climate lens. And again, I think it's quite a weak statement. I mean, looking at something through a climate lens, what does that mean in terms of process? It's a long-term plan. We need to be ensuring that we are not just putting words there. We need to be looking at how the climate is affecting our assets and what cost that is to our community, economically, socially, and governance.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
I want to say that Councillor Price is correct. She's much more excited about this than I am.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.1, the recommendation is the council endorses the draft Privacy Policy 2022 review for community consultation for a period of 21 days. The council considers any community feedback, and the council schedules the privacy policy to be brought back to a future council meeting for adoption. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Tysell, seconder, Councillor Price. Councillor Tysell.
Yeah, I think that a person or individual company's privacy is actually a very important thing that we actually need to keep reviewing to make sure that we are actually putting our best foot forward, and that people can be assured that if matters are brought to Indigo Shire Council, they're going to be treated respectfully and privately, and that their agency will be protected.
That's right, Councillor Price.
To echo some of what Councillor Tyson said, it's really important that our policy reflects just how seriously we take the collecting of any of this information. And so I'm really pleased to see in the body of the report that we've gone to all of the peak bodies in terms of making sure that our policy stacks up with best practice in that regard. So I think that that's what our community would expect, and I'm pleased to see that that's exactly how it's been developed.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
This is a minor thing, but I was just wondering, when I was reading it, and it came up that we need to follow the IPPs in the first statement, and it wasn't until I got further down that I saw what an IPP was. I just wondering if we could spell out what an IPP is up the top would be great, because I found it, but it'd be great if we could just put that with the prescribed IPPs. Yeah, but otherwise, it's as has already been said, a great document where people quite clearly can see what's going to happen with their information.
CEO.
I'm sure we can amend that in the final version, Councillor.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Just before I ask Councillor Tyson, I think the privacy of the citizens and the community of Indigo Shire is paramount and must always be respected. Councillor Tyson, would you wish to sum up?
Yeah, just as with everything else that we've actually moved tonight, I urge the community to read the documents and to put their submissions in. You've got a time frame, please adhere to it.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.2 is contracts awarded under Chief Executive Officer Delegation for April 22 for information only. There were no contracts awarded by the CEO for values between $250,000 and $500,000 for the month of April. Item 13.3, the recommendation is that Council receives the attached unconfirmed advisory committee minutes. The Council notes the following recommendations from Indigo and endorses the recommended action, which is Indigo Committee received the terms of reference document and has requested some amendments to the terms of references as detailed in the table below. The Council notes the following recommendations from the Indigo Shire Community Grants and Awards Committee and endorses the recommended actions. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price. Seconder, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price.
In the budget access meeting, we discussed at the access committee meeting of that month, we discussed the 4-year plan for the committee. And again, I just highlight that to acknowledge the really strategic approach that our committees can take in providing us advice. We also turned our mind to accessible events and referred to a good document from Tasmania, and we're still progressing our project of good access, good business across the Shire with the help of Zoe Gephardt, one of our committee members who works for Indigo North Health, and we'd been providing feedback to Bilson's. So there's always quite a bit going on in that committee, and just another really active month for them.
Councillor Shepherd. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price? No. Anybody against that motion? Carried. Item 13.4 is the informal meetings of councillors' records. The recommendation is the council accepts the attached informal meetings of councillor records. Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Horn. Councillor Price.
Just a procedural item that we have to have every month. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Horn. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Before we proceed, I'd just like to ask the Senior Governance Officer, if you go back to 10.3, the draft budget report, could you tell me what names I said were in favour?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got in favour councillors Peter Croucher, Bernard Gaffney, Larry Goldsworthy, Sophie Price, Diane Shepherd and Emmerich Teisel.
Thank you. I just thought that I might have left Councillor Croucher out, but I'm glad I didn't. Item 14.1, which is a notice of motion. I'll have to vacate the chair. And the Deputy Mayor, who's on Zoom, can't take over the chair, so it goes to the CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the purpose of clarity of this meeting, the governance rules provides that the mayor who wishes to move a motion must vacate the chair. Normally, the governance rules would require that the deputy mayor take the chair. Given that the deputy mayor is actually not physically present in the meeting, but present via Zoom, is incapable of physically taking the chair. So that requires on the governance rules since to fall to myself then to seek nominations for someone else to chair the meeting. So I therefore call for nominations for someone else other than councillors Gaffney or Croucher to chair the meeting for this item. Do I have any nominations for the role of chair? I'll do one last call. Okay, Mr. Mayor, I might ask you to return to the chair and advise that we're not able to raise an alternate temporary chair for this item. So this item cannot be heard at this meeting.
Can we still have the opportunity to nominate a chair at this stage?
I guess it's up to the chair now. He's back in the chair.
No, seeing that I'm back in the chair, I'd have to vacate the chair, but the motion's lapsed.
You could vacate the chair again, did you say?
Well, just a moment. I said I vacated the chair, yes, and I think you called 3 times for nominations, none were received. So I was invited to retake the chair, which I have done. So therefore the motion's lapsed.
I have a question. From a governance perspective, are we able to?
I think the motion's lapsed, Councillor. I don't think you can ask questions or motion, it's lapsed.
I have a question. Surely I can ask a question.
Well, I'll just get the governance rules.
I'm not looking.
Just a moment.
I'm not looking to reinitiate the discussion on this. I'm actually looking to adjourn.
I know, but there's page 29. Questions must be relevant to the agenda item under consideration. This agenda item is not under consideration, therefore the question is not valid.
You don't even know what the question is. I haven't asked it. I want to ask a question.
I could say that I think I do know the question, but then that would be confidential. So, well, I'll ask you, is the question relevant to the agenda item under consideration?
Under the discussion at the moment, yeah.
Under consideration. The motion's lapsed.
Yep.
So there's no question under consideration.
I just want to ask whether we can adjourn it.
I know what you want, but that's not in accordance with the governance rules.
So you're not allowing me to ask a question at the start?
Well, I've just said, is the question relevant to the agenda item under consideration? There's no agenda item under consideration at this time.
So you don't want me to ask the question?
Well, I don't, it's against the governance rules. You may think it's funny, Councillor, but I don't.
Well, I just find it ridiculous. You want to talk about transparency, but you don't want me to ask a question.
Well, There is no item under consideration at the moment.
Rose?
I just have a governance question, if I can. I was unsure of that. In terms of nominating someone, do you nominate someone else or you meant to nominate yourself? Like, what were we waiting for? Me to nominate someone else, or were we waiting for us to nominate ourselves?
Yes, well, you can answer it, but I think it works both ways.
I called for nominations. The nominations could come from anybody. I received no nominations. Anyone can nominate anybody.
So is there no leniency that we could continue to ask for nominations? I just thought that you would want to have.
The motion has lapsed. Once I was told that there were no nominations and to come back to the chair, which I did do, the motion's lapsed. Right? Item 15 is councillors' report. Item 15.1 is the Mayor's diary for January. Item 16.1 is the decisions register for information. Item 17, general business.
I have an item for general business.
Sorry?
I have an item for general business.
Thank you, councillor
It's a question of the governance officer. If a motion is put up and we determine that we'd like to hear it later, how do we go about doing that?
Thanks, councillor Goldsworthy, through you, Mr Chair. Item 67 of the governance rules allows for procedural motions. A procedural motion may be moved at any time and must be dealt with immediately. Under G of 67, you have the councillors have the option of an item deferral, where an item of business may be deferred to another meeting or a different point in the same meeting. Another option is that a councillor may move for an item closure, which is that the item just be basically put to bed and not further debated. Adjournment doesn't relate so much to a single item as to the meeting. So in this instance, the item deferral would be the appropriate.
So am I able to move a motion to defer this item to the next meeting where all councillors are present in the chamber? That's for item 14.1.
You're able to move a procedural motion. I think I probably have to confer with the CEO whether procedural motion would apply to an item that's passed. I don't think the governance rules anticipate that being a specific item or not in the agenda. It does say at any time.
I don't think it's clear, really, whether it does apply to an item that lapsed earlier in the meeting or not. It does say a procedural motion can be heard at any time. We're probably unclear on that.
So I'd like to move a procedural motion that item 14.1 on this agenda is moved to a meeting where all councillors of the Indigo Shire Council are present in the meeting physically.
Can I ask a question of clarification? What would be happening to this motion anyway, now that it's lapsed? Would it just be coming up to the next council meeting anyway?
As an item on this agenda, it was not dealt with, so it's just lapsed. So there's no instruction as to what to do with it next. So I would suggest that the person who put the motion up, which was Councillor Gaffney, may well then choose to resubmit it to the next meeting. But this meeting has not given any instructions to what to do with it.
So my procedural motion stands. I'd like to move it.
Now, your procedural motion is in regard to something that's lapsed, and I'd like to congratulate the Senior Governance Officer that you had that page open when you asked the question. I don't know whether you can have a procedural motion for something that's lapsed. I wouldn't mind adjourning and having a conversation with the CEO regarding this. So we'll adjourn for 5 minutes.
Well, you need a motion for that.
That requires a procedural motion.
Well, I can't move a motion from the chair. Moved by Councillor Tysell, seconded by Councillor Horn. All those. So what motion have you moved? Oh, that we adjourn for.
Yeah. I move a procedural motion that we adjourn for 5 minutes while we seek consultation on Councillor Goldworthy's motion.
Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just hold a second. Is that live stream?
So councillor Goldsworthy, what is your motion?
Sorry, through you, Mr Chair. What councillor Goldsworthy moved was that item 14.1 be deferred to a meeting when all councillors are physically present at the meeting.
Do you have a seconder for that? The issue that I have is that that is a motion of deferment of convenience. And how could you put something in an agenda if you don't know that there are going to be 7 councillors physically in the chamber, and that's what you're asking? I think if you wanted to defer to a date of a council meeting, that would be acceptable. But I think a motion of convenience because you don't want something heard unless every councillor is in the chamber is difficult. And to put something in an agenda, there's a community expectation that that matter will then be put in and debated.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor. Could I know the result of our previous conversation about the deferral?
Not sure what you mean.
Well, that was why you left the room.
Sorry?
To find out whether or not the deferral, we could actually defer it.
Well, it can't be a deferral of convenience, but it can be deferred to a date. So you've moved that, the 28th of June. You've moved that motion? Do you have a seconder? Well, you don't have to be the seconder. Do you have would somebody like to second the motion? Seconded by councillor Shepherd. All those in favour, raise your hand. Councillor Croucher, councillor Shepherd, councillor Goldsworthy, councillor Gaffney, councillor Horn, councillor Tysell, and councillor Price, 28th of June. That was in general business. Do we have any other general business? No.
We are actually now having people come to our gallery, and we have no agendas available for them. So they can't actually keep up with what we're doing. We have no printed agendas out for them. Plus, it is considerably dark outside. Is there any way we can improve the lighting, especially given that we're going to be moving into the darker month of the year, so that we actually can aid people in being here?
Do you take that on board, Tia?
Take it on board, yeah.
I've got one other general business, a lighter one, that it's volunteer week. And just on behalf of all the council, I think we need to thank the volunteers. I know the Indigo Shire is one of the highest volunteer-led communities in Victoria. So just want to congratulate, most of us are volunteers, and I think most people out there listening and the rest are volunteering in some manner. So yay us.
The next council meeting will be Tuesday, the 14th of June, which is to hear submissions. The next ordinary council meeting will be on the 28th of June, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. I now declare the meeting closed at
757.
7:57. Thank you for your attendance.